Board of Education for October 20th, 2020 is called to order. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Welcome to tonight's board meeting. We're going to begin with another recognition, proclamation, resolution to recognize some of our employees. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this item?
I would love to, Chair Lowry. Good evening. I'd like to invite our Chief of School Support, Brenda Martinick, up to say a few words about our school psychologists.
Thank you. As you know, November 9th through the 13th is National School Psychologist Week. Tonight, we want to recognize our school psychologists for all of their hard work and dedication to our students and families here in PPS. School psychologists are uniquely qualified members of school teams that support students' abilities to learn and teachers' abilities to teach. They apply expertise in special ed evaluations, mental health supports, academic learning, behavior plans in order to help our students succeed. They partner with families, teachers, and school administrators and other professionals to create safe, healthy, and supportive learning environments, which strengthen connections between home, school, and the community. In addition to this, our school psychologists support our multi-tiered systems of support teams to identify student strengths and their needs and to promote equitable outcomes through academic and social emotional tiered supports. They also specialize in our special education testing, eligibility, and legal requirements around access and supports for students with disabilities. Our school psychologists apply their training and expertise to help ensure that every student is able to realize the graduate portrait in order to lead a more socially just world. So thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. The board will now bring forward resolution number 6192, resolution to recognize November 9th through 13th, 2020 as National School Psychology Week. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Director Brim Edwards moves.
Didn't get that. Could you try again?
And Director Bailey seconds. So Director Brim Edwards moves and Director Bailey seconds. And we've got Siri talking to us too, or Alexa or somebody. Okay, Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment on resolution 6192?
No.
Is there any board discussion on this resolution? I know that we would all echo what Ms. Martinick brought forward to us about the importance of school psychologists and the wellness of children as a key part of their ability to live into that graduate portrait. And so it is wonderful to be able to have this resolution to recognize the importance of school psychology.
And Director, I would just echo that. I actually had just a quick, but I can't, everything seems to be lost on my computer. So anyway, I just wanted to echo that, how important that really is, and those words in the resolution. And yeah, very, very happy to vote in support of it. So thanks for that.
Chair Lowry, I just want to thank, I want to add and underline my appreciation for our dedicated school psychologists as well, and appreciate the board's recognition of their work.
All right, any further discussion?
There we go. I think it's important to recognize we're in a pretty big mental health crisis in this country right now, with huge increase in people trying to reach out to deal with anxiety, depression. So the role of psychologists is even more important now.
All right, the board will now vote on resolution 6192, which resolves that the Board of Education of Portland Public Schools extends greetings and best wishes to all observing November 9th through 13th, 2020 as National School Psychology Week. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Resolution 6192, resolution to recognize November 9th through 13th, 2020 as National School Psychology Week is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Shu voting.
Yes.
Thank you, Nathaniel. All right, we move now to the board consent agenda. Board members, if there are any items you would like to pull, we will set those aside for discussion and vote at the end of the meeting. Are there any items you would like to pull from the consent agenda? Great. Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion and second to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Director Scott moves and Director Constam seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. Is there any board discussion on the consent agenda?
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to take note of one of the contracts with the Klosch Group, which is highlights the diversification of our contracting for the huge piece of work that is our construction management. And I think we're going to dig into this a little bit at our school improvement bond committee meeting our next time to better understand how we are breaking up these contracts and how we arrived at that. But I support that strategy. And this is, I believe, this is the second to come through. The first was with Heary, which was with whom we had originally contracted, but it's good to see.
So I also want to just note that we have an extension of the lease to Kairos on the agenda. And I guess I want to highlight that they sent a request to the board this summer about their lease terms. And given that we're in the latter part of the fall, it would be good to, I would support us setting a timeline for trying to get a response back to them on their request of us. I fully support the lease extension as well.
Is there any further discussion on the consent agenda? All right, the board will now vote on resolutions 6193 through 6198. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Shu voting.
Yes.
Thank you, Nathaniel. All right, we're going to take a brief commercial break here to do some more encouraging of voting now that we've all voted twice. See how I did that? And Director Brim-Edwards and Director Bailey are going to share with us a little bit about the bond and why you should vote yes on the bond, PPS bond that's on the ballot for November 3rd. Director Bailey, would you like to go first?
I would. Wow, this is the third bond that I've been a part of in some way or other. A number of us were on the ground floor in 2012 when we met at the Lucky Lab and got this bond program started. I'm really excited it's continuing. I think it's a huge statement on the part of voters that they have supported us modernizing our buildings. We have a long way to go. So we have over 80 school buildings, and I think, what are we up to? 6 that are up to current safety for a big earthquake. And so we're going to be looking at having to modernize all of them over the coming decades. But in the meantime, we have to take care of the buildings that aren't yet modernized. And that means taking care of roofs. If you let water into a building, bad things happen. And that's why roofs are so important. And also, I assume there's some exterior brickwork as part of that as well to keep the water out. It is crucial. We'll also be investing in replacing some HVAC systems. Nobody wants to have the heating go out in the middle of December in their school building, even if there's nobody in it. And we're learning how important good ventilation is as well. That's part of an HVAC system. I'm excited about the security improvements that we started in the last bond and are continuing, and we'll continue the health and safety work. We took care of a lot of the big chunks in dealing with lead in the water, lead paint, radon, and asbestos, but there's it's like any old buildings, there's always more work to be done there to improve the safety for occupants. So there's just great stuff in this bond. Anywhere you look, it's going to touch pretty much every building in the district in some way or another. And it's really focused on what's needed now. So I'm very happy that we're on now a regular maintenance schedule for our buildings going forward, and as well as replacing and modernizing as we go ahead. Thanks.
So I'm going to build on Director Bailey's comments. I think it's important to understand, to frame it up, that it's all of that work that Director Bailey just outlined will be done while keeping us at our current tax rate. So those are investments that will impact every student, every classroom, and every school. I want to just highlight two particular aspects that have been talked about before, but just to remind voters are in the package. First, I want to share from a message that the social justice youth community sent out today, including with a new video about the accessibility improvements that are in this package. So an excerpt from their communication. So Measure 26-215 calls for landmark commitment of funds to support a vital inflection point at PPS and creates a thoughtful investment in both physical buildings that are more accessible and safer, as well as equipped for the 21st century needs of all students. The voices that can be heard on this new video, the disability rights or civil rights, vote yes on Measure 26-215, created by members of the Youth Social Justice Group, outlines the critical investments that are going to be made. So in the bond, the bond will make investments that after 30 years of the ADA law passing, the first floor of every building will be made accessible. This is a heartening step forward and an indication of how long accessibility concerns have languished since the passage of the ADA. So a huge step forward. They also highlight the other investments in this package that are critical to equity and accessibility, and they include $128 million in technology, including assistive technology, $13 million to improve teaching and learning environments for diverse learners, $183 million in the health and safety improvements. And again, I would encourage people to, there's a 5-minute video of our teachers, students, alums, allies talking about how important these investments will be to our students. And you can see that at yespdxschools.com. It's a great video. We'll recognize some of the people in it as they are, again, staff and students and alums. In addition, the second thing in the bond that I wanted to highlight is just the continuation of our long-term plans to modernize all our high schools. In essence, this bond, if it passes, will really mark, I think, that the closing chapter of the high schools. Will have the modernization, the full modernization of Jefferson, a school that was built in 1909. And also we'll get Cleveland High School and Wilson High School shovel ready with a big investment in design and planning for those modernizations. And then in addition, there will be an investment in North Portland and Roosevelt in planning for an expansion given the positive enrollment changes that happened there. So two key things in this package that will really speak to both equity and accessibility. And I think on the strength of this package, I want to share, just since we had our last meeting, the bond package that this board, that the staff and board created, and that the board referred to the voters. It's been pressure tested in multiple forums, and pleased to report that both the Oregonian and Willamette Week have endorsed the measure and encouraged a yes vote for the package. So thank you.
Julia, did I forget to mention that we are getting all this at the same tax rate that we have now?
Yes.
Can't say that enough, Scott.
Yes, this is a renewal of the same rate, so it will not increase your taxes to vote on this, to vote yes on this. All right, we are going to move now to student and public comment. Before we begin, I want to review our guidelines for comment. The board thanks for the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments. Tonight, we have a special treat. We have a video comment because our meeting is past the bedtime for our student. So we'll be receiving their comments via video. Public input informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. And our responsibility as a board is to actively listen. Board members and the superintendent will not respond to comments or questions during public comment, but our board office will follow up on board-related issues raised during public testimony. We request that complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional materials or items you would like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you email them to publiccomment@pps.net. And we've already received some materials from some of those folks speaking tonight, so thank you for that. Please make sure when you begin your comment that you clearly state your name and spell your last name. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and you will hear a sound after 3 minutes, which means it's time to conclude your comments. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have anyone signed up for student or public comment tonight?
Yes. Let's start with Nigel Whaling.
Hi, my name is Nigel Whaling, W-E-H-L-I-N-G, and my pronouns are he, him. I am a 10th grader at Lincoln High School. I want to share my experience with the online learning so far and the 5 issues I have had. 1, I have to juggle this new learning environment with 8 subjects, which is double the amount of other high schools. Each teacher uses everything differently and has different expectations. I must learn the extra applications each teacher decides to use as well. 2, I don't understand some of my teacher's expectations because I can't just raise my hand and ask a question. In one class, I had a really important question on an assignment and emailed my teacher. She never replied. I had to turn in a half-completed assignment because I didn't understand it. 3, since asynchronous time is used differently every single day, I never know what to expect. I had a doctor's appointment during one of my asynchronous classes. We had a surprise test that day. I had to take that test while I was in a car going to my doctor's appointment. I couldn't submit it because of the lack of internet. 4, no adult seems to understand that our world has changed. They expect us to do things the way they were done last year. We have 8 periods, we attend class 6 hours a day, we are graded, we are assigned tons of homework, even more now because the teachers seem to feel disconnected from us. For 4 weeks, I worked on that computer 77 hours per week, 16 to 24 hours in class, and 53 to 61 hours doing online homework while trying to figure out how the new system worked. My weekends were 12 hours of online homework on both days. I was exhausted. 5, during that time, I was working 77 hours per week and I got 9 migraines. It was from staring at the screen for all the hours. I recently changed my classes to lighten the workload, but this is how your decisions have affected me as a student at Lincoln High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Matilda Barth, and that is our video comment. Roseanne, are you ready to present that?
Can you enable my screen sharing?
Of course. There you go.
I don't have any volume. Can other people hear her? No, it looks like we don't have volume. Still no volume. It may be that you need to, whoever is presenting might need to click turn on original sound on your Zoom meeting because the computer will suppress the background noise. So it should be in the top left of your Zoom window, turn on original sound.
Can we come back to this public comment and move on while I try to figure this out?
Of course. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have further public comment?
Yes, we have Gretchen Gainey.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm ready for my statement. Let me just find a better. Sorry. Okay. My name is Gretchen Gainey.
Could you speak up just a little bit? I'm having a hard time hearing you. Is anybody else?
It's that.
I'm also having a hard time hearing.
That's much better, Gretchen.
Can you hear me now? Okay. My name is Gretchen Gainey, G-A-N-E-Y, she, her, and I'm a teacher at Irvington. Thank you for your time this evening. I would like to share information about the state of our literacy instruction at PPS and the urgent need to continue to fund the letters professional development for our K-5 educators. I'm aware that funding sources may dry up, but training for PPS teachers in the science of reading is not a line item that should be cut. If anything, it should be expanded in light of the cuts that will inevitably need to be made. After all, what is the most critical skill we can give to our students? The gift of literacy. Reading is something that many of us take for granted, especially if we were among the 40% of students who learned to read no matter what the teacher did. The other 60% of students require direct, explicit, systematic instruction that sadly most teachers, including myself, have not been prepared to give. Despite the fact that I have 2 degrees in education, a reading endorsement, and have been a teacher for 21 years, I have only recently, through Orton Gillingham and the letters professional development, been exposed to the type of structured literacy to teaching reading that I should have gotten as a beginning tutor. The more I learn about how we learn to read and write, the more I feel a sense of urgency as I recognize that huge numbers of students are not getting this critical instruction from the beginning of their school careers. And each year that a child fails to learn to read, it becomes harder and often impossible for him or her to catch up with grade level peers. Each year the gap widens. Currently, there aren't enough reading interventionists to remediate the reading instruction for so many learners. This model has to shift to one in which we expect every single K2 teacher and eventually K5 teacher to be a highly trained and skilled teacher of English reading. A child's success should not depend on which kinder, first, or second grade classroom he or she lands in PPS. Thanks to the dedicated drumbeat of parents and organizations such as Decoding Dyslexia and some fabulous reporting by journalist Emily Hanford of American Public Media, a broader recognition that teachers must be trained in the science of reading has begun. Legislation passed in Oregon and around the country has addressed the needs for comprehensive screening and of instruction for students with potential reading difficulties. How does that translate to everyday classroom? Our district and districts around the country have invested in critical reading curricula and supplemental reading materials that are not based in the science of reading, and they often run counter to that science, in effect teaching and encouraging students to use strategies that poor readers rely on. In sum, most teachers do not have the professional knowledge to teach students the most effective and efficient reading strategies. The answer to turning this around is high quality ongoing professional development and coaching in the science of reading, and a cohort of PPS teachers is currently going through a self-paced professional development model known as LETRS, L-E-T-R-S. Teaching reading is the most fundamental teaching we do, and yet it is one of the most complex undertakings as well. Research has proven that if we use a systematic approach to reading instruction, we could teach the majority of our students to read proficiently by the end of first grade. We would save millions of dollars that we end up spending on staff and resources to remediate those students later or support some of them when they eventually drop out because they did not learn the most basic skill they needed to be successful in school and life. I have said to many of my colleagues that this is literally a life or death situation for some of our students, and the ability to help them should rest in our hands, but we need the professional knowledge and the tools to do it effectively and efficiently. Thank you for your time.
I'm impressed you got that all in perfectly at 3 minutes. That was excellent. That shows, the planning of a teacher right there. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have further public comment?
Yes. Denise Archer.
Hi, I'm Denise Archer, Archer, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the parent of Nigel Whaling, a Lincoln High School 10th grader, and here's my experience of Lincoln's home distance learning as a parent. Before the pandemic, Nigel signed up for 8 classes. They included IB Math, IB Chemistry, and the Constitution team for which he interviewed and got accepted. After the pandemic, I was surprised to learn that Lincoln was to have 8 periods while other high schools were following the 4x4 model in order to support students during an international crisis. As soon as the school year began, Nigel would wake up and immediately get on his laptop to begin school at 9:15 a.m. Aside from a 15-minute lunch break and a half-hour dinner break, he would continue to work on his laptop until 10:30 or 11 p.m. when it was time to go to bed. Nigel looked terrible. By the evening, his eyes were bloodshot and he had dark circles and bags underneath them. He had 9 migraines in 1 month. I began to track Nigel's weekly hours. He spent 77 hours per week staring at his screen working on school. He had 8 hours of social time and 3 hours of dinner time with the family, all per week. It appears that nobody wants to pivot. The school continues offering 8 periods of classes and the teachers continue assigning large amounts of work. And I don't understand how it is even acceptable, much less legal, to withhold a student's points on a surprise correctional test during an asynchronous class because he has a neurologist appointment due to all the screen time at school. Nigel has always been a straight A student. In fact, he received his first B last year. However, his current progress report states 4 Fs, 1 D, and 1 C because of the migraines. The grades will be resolved soon. With all due respect, this is not an education. This school year is not even admirable persistence. The workload and level of stress created by Lincoln's 8-period class schedule is unsustainable and, pardon me, toxic. Nigel has friends who spend more time on their computers for school than he does, 14 to 16 hours per day, as impossible as that sounds. And these are growing teens with growing brains. What I had to teach Nigel is that the core of resiliency is the ability to pivot. He has dropped French and will complete that during summer school. He dropped Con Team, which is a passion project. He switched from IB Chem to regular Chem. Nigel's favorite subject is math. He's 2 years ahead of his peers in math, so he dropped that class. However, there is great loss in having to give up the studies you enjoy most. It's only been 1 week, but things are looking better. And I just want Nigel to enjoy school and his final years as a kid. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosette, are you ready for Matilda's testimony?
Let's try this again.
Dear Portland Public School Board, my name is Matilda Barth. I am a 4th grader. I am now a top reader and speller in my class. 2 years ago, I was even scared to look at a piece of paper, like I'm doing now, and try to read. There were too many letters and words, and I did not have the necessary skills to decode the sounds into words. I have been receiving private tutoring twice and a week, 1 hour each session, 2 years. My tutoring utilizes OG-based curriculum, which is multi-sensor, direct, explicit, structured, and sequential. I am an example of how well proper tools and education can make a difference in a student's life. I am a lucky, privileged person because my parents have been able to afford to pay for my tutoring. My purpose here today, talking to the PPS board, is to ask you to provide fair and equitable education for all students in your district by providing explicit teacher training. All students deserve the opportunity to succeed like I have been able to succeed. Thank you.
I'm so glad we were able to make that work. Thank you, Roseanne. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have any other public comment or student comment?
No, that concludes our public comment.
Board Chair, if I could just interject here, I really appreciate our young students' ingenuity and finding a creative way to offer her testimony during a time of distance learning, and I guess we could call it distance testimony.
I like that, distance testimony, definitely. Well, we're going to continue hearing from our students. We're going to turn now to our student representative, Nathaniel Hsu, and hear his report tonight. Nathaniel, are you ready?
I think so. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I've been having some problems. I'm trying to dial in now. Tell me if it cuts out. So thus far, my reports have dealt almost exclusively with the affairs of our students, oftentimes with a focus on the DSC. And that's okay. That's largely the purpose of these reports. However, I will be taking a different approach tonight. Today marks exactly 2 weeks until the November elections. Since these elections will have an immeasurable and direct impact on our students and the quality of their education, and since I, like the vast majority of our students, have been prohibited from personally participating in them, in my case, because I was born 20 weeks short of the arbitrary cutoff date, I feel that I can hardly refrain from discussing them tonight. I would like to begin with our very own ballot measure 26215, the proposal to renew our school bond. While it has been said before, it bears repeating that this measure is an extraordinary opportunity for the voters of our district to have a truly meaningful positive impact on their public schools without raising taxes. It would raise a total of $1.208 billion and utilize that money to make significant improvements in a multitude of areas, from curriculum to infrastructure. The single largest allocation would be for the modernization of Jefferson High School's building at $311 million. As someone who is now in his 4th year at Jefferson, I can personally say that this funding is desperately needed. Our building, which was built in large part over 110 years ago and has not been substantially renovated in over half a century, has no shortage of issues, from holes in the walls to widespread plumbing issues, to rodent infestations, to fundamental seismic vulnerabilities, to simply being too outdated to adequately accommodate modern education. It is, quite frankly, a disgrace and a disservice to the Jefferson community that it has taken us this long to address these problems. But now that the opportunity to do so is here, the voters of our district should certainly seize it. Additionally, this bond would advance the modernization of other schools, such as by completing construction at Benson Polytechnic High School and providing $40 million of funding for planning, design, and pre-construction at Wilson and Cleveland High Schools. The bond would also provide $60 million for the creation of an Albina-located Center for Black Student Excellence, which would advance the district's equity goals. The precise nature of this center would be largely left for the community to decide, as should be the case. The bond would furthermore provide $183 million for, as we heard previously, health and safety improvements, including roofs, security, and seismic resiliency. It would allocate a combined total of $181.6 billion to $181.6 million to upgrading our school's curricula and technology, both of which are at this time rather outdated. And by investing $13.4 and $33.8 million in special education and ADA accessibility, respectively, it would considerably advance inclusive education. In short, Measure 26215 would make great progress toward PPS's long-term goals. It would make education in our district more equitable, inclusive, modern, and safe. It would truly benefit all of our students, especially those historically underserved by our district, and by extension, our city and our state. And it would do so without increasing taxes. I urge all of those watching tonight to raise awareness of the bond's importance however you are able. And if you are allowed, please vote in favor. In case you don't already know, the campaign website is yespdxschools.com. Finally, I would like to conclude by mentioning the national level elections, and more specifically, the presidential election. I understand that most of those watching tonight have likely been pretty tuned into national election news, and that this is not the forum through which such matters are normally discussed. But in all likelihood, this election shall dictate the future of our nation and our world. It will determine the society into which our students will graduate. So this much I will say, please vote. Vote bearing in mind that you are choosing a future for those of us who cannot do so ourselves. Vote bearing in mind that in our nation's response to the climate crisis, the continued existence of humanity may very well be at stake. Vote bearing in mind that the United States' status as a constitutional republic, a liberal democracy, and a relatively free and plural society is contingent on the election's outcome. Vote with the utmost level of care and intention. Thank you, and that will conclude my report.
Thank you, Student Representative Shu, for your leadership and for your words tonight. I think we can all take them to heart as we thoughtfully consider our choices this election. Superintendent Guerrero, do you have a report to share with us tonight?
Thank you, Chair, I do, but Nathaniel just made it a very hard act to follow. I do have just a few slides. Well, now you're giving away all my secrets there, Roseanne.
It's, again, as our teachers and our students are dealing with distance learning and all of the technological pieces, it's, I think, good to model that we too have a lot to navigate. And it's always good to see, behind the curtain, Superintendent Guerrero.
Well, good evening, directors. We try to be prepared in what we want to share. And this superintendent's report on the regular meeting board agenda is generally an opportunity for me to share with our broader community highlights of all that occurs across our school district that illustrates the work, the progress towards our district priorities, as well as remark on the challenges that we're facing as a school system. It has also been an opportunity for me to provide some personal reflections on the state of affairs impacting our students, their families, and our lives. So I've spoken on the inhumane ways our immigrant community has been treated in our community and what it means to stand up for Black lives. And I've also used this space to celebrate the way our students show up each and every day, living into our vision of students being prepared to, as our vision states, lead change and improve the world. So tonight I'm going to try to do all three. So next slide. So back in the 1990s, I was an idealistic educator in the heart of San Francisco's Mission District. I walked into my first classroom assignment determined to make a lasting impact on the lives of these pictured fourth graders, convinced that if I provided them with a rigorous and engaging experience, that they might go on to lead successful and thriving lives. What I learned from them, however, is that while as educators, we have a responsibility to be prepared, but also focus on creating a joyful learning space and opportunities, that our students are more than equipped to think big, to demand bigger. So again, pictured here is my first official class of students, back in the early 90s. I was a fourth grade Spanish bilingual teacher, arguably the best year of my professional career. What I thoroughly enjoyed and appreciated about this formative experience was seeing these students find their spark, their joy, their love of learning. But as important was the way in which they led change in the community. So this picture is actually super special for me, for various reasons. Behind the students, you might notice that there's some building scaffolds. My students were collaborating in the design of a mural decorating the school with some really important themes to us at a time when Latinos in the mission, including my students, were advocating for the expression of our culture through public art. And now it's a must-see in the neighborhood when you visit San Francisco. What you don't see in the picture is a younger, long-haired version of your superintendent. Thank you for the surprise gift to our students of room 10. So imagine elementary age students thinking big, leading change, and improving the world. So next slide. Here in Portland, I've seen the way in which our students have also shown up. On Friday, as part of our Council of Great City Schools annual conference, students from across the country participated in a town hall on racial equity and social justice. We were fortunate to have one of PPS's own students on the panel, Carmela Thomas, a senior at Grant High School, who on top of being one of this year's Rose Festival princesses, is also president of MECHA and leads teach-ins on topics of race at the school as part of the school's Race Forward initiative. Directors, I know many of you were tuned in to this incredible panel and were moved by the way in which these students showed up. Carmela showcased the very best of Portland Public Schools, attributes of the graduate portrait we aspire for all of our young leaders, a transformative racial equity leader, powerful and effective communicator, reflective, empathetic, and empowering, optimistic, future-oriented. So Carmela, like you heard Nathaniel tonight, is one of thousands of students who already possess these attributes. And I'm so very proud that many colleagues across the country were able to get a taste of how incredible our young people are. I was listening attentively to Nathaniel, and you just can't say it any better. Shout out also to the Grant High School Dance Collective, of which Carmela was selected last year's MVP for also sharing their prior recorded performance during the conference. Next slide. So living into the attributes of the graduate profile, and as an extension, our educator essentials, is especially important during a moment of national reckoning on racial injustice. So students all over our city are speaking up, demanding change and leading the way. Students like Aiden Carter from Rosa Parks Elementary School, featured here on the front cover of Times for Kids, leading protests to declare unequivocally that Black Lives Matter. Students like Janaea Casey and Rio Meyer of Lincoln High School, who are creating safe and youth-led spaces for students to express their voices openly. Or like last week, when PPS students met with City Commissioner Joanne Hardesty to insist that our elected officials live into our commitment to racial equity and social justice. Or as Janaea says, and I quote, "Black Lives Matter is not just a 2020 issue. Black lives have and always will matter, no matter what." So I'll bring my superintendent's report to a close, but it would behoove me to share a few thoughts ahead of the upcoming election also, which is a really important component of living in a democracy. Earlier, Director Brim Edwards shared with you that young people had created a video highlighting that disability rights are civil and human rights. On your screen is Daniel Jarvis Holland, a Benson High School graduate, and Rachel Esteve, a Cleveland High School graduate, and leaders for the Social Justice Youth Group at Northwest Down Syndrome Association. In 2 weeks, voters across the country and in our community will have the opportunity to make important choices. The run-up to this year's election and the potential scenarios that follow it are at the same time, understandably, already causing a great deal of anxiety across our communities, especially for our students, staff, and families of color. So staff is preparing guidance to make sure district and community supports are advertised and made available to our students and educators, and are also seeking input from our school leaders and educators. And here's what I hope to be true on November 3rd, that our community will lean into our core values of respect, racial equity, and social justice, and keeping our students at the center. That our community will be compassionate, critical thinkers who, as I described earlier, are thinking big and demanding bigger. And that our community is listening, that they are listening to our young people's demand for a more socially just world. I know that our school board will be expressing their commitment to living into a more socially just world by joining the Oregon State Board of Education in making it clear our district's position on Black Lives Matter and expressions of hate in schools. And I want to thank you in advance for your words and actions. And that concludes my remarks for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Guerrero, for your very powerful report highlighting the incredible work our students are already doing to lead and to make this world a more just and equitable place. The Oregon Department of Education is also engaged in that work, and last week ODE passed a Black Lives Matter resolution and urged school districts to create and nurture an inclusive and welcoming environment for all students, families, and employees in which all students belong. I was heartened personally by the step that our state leaders took, as it is in alignment with the resolution we passed in June, number 6130, that says, in support of recentering the PPS student experience through supportive and affirming people, culture, and climate. That's the name of the resolution. The sentiment in that resolution is more important now than ever. And as the resolution stated, we need to be a community that not only expresses, but also lives a commitment to every person's fundamental right to human dignity. We commit to eliminating the racism and oppression embedded in PPS and rebuilding it as an education system that affirms positive identities, nurtures a sense of belonging, and promotes a joy of learning. And Superintendent, I want to thank you for your continued commitment to racial equity and social justice, and for modeling what it means to be an equity leader. I'd also say that as board chair these last several months, it's been wonderful to be able to make mistakes, to live into my white dominant culture and do all the things that are acts of white supremacy, like valuing urgency, prioritizing perfection, and to be in a space with the rest of the board that we're working through that. We're calling each other in to new practices, and we're working on modeling different behaviors. And so I really appreciate the authentic lived out practice of this board and of our senior leadership to grow and change, and for us to be able to stop and say in the midst of doing something, wait a minute, we're rehearsing the same old script, we're following into the same bad patterns, and be able to shift and adjust with grace and with forgiveness towards one another, and with a real commitment to learn. So I just so appreciate both how this organization is shifting for our community, but also for me personally, and the ways that I am being allowed to grow and learn as chair and as a member of the board. Would any of board members like the ODE resolution?
I think everybody's waiting for me to go. I agree with you. I also appreciate the superintendent's leadership on this issue. If anybody on this call would like to see a commitment to Black Lives Matter that's on this call today, it would be me. I'd love to see it yesterday, or even 10 years ago. I fully support the district's targeted universalism and focusing our theory of action, our strategies on addressing racial inequities. Yeah, I also support giving this more time to be more intentional. As I was looking at the resolution over the weekend, I see some places where I think that needs to be strengthened, and I'd like to be more intentional, specifically about calling out anti-Black racism. And I'd like to see us be quite a bit more intentional in our language, recognizing that when we're not intentional, or when we're not using real words, that we're prioritizing the comfort of white people. And in order for us to actually do institutional and organizational change, we need to use explicit language, to back up our intent. And so, yeah, that's. I look forward to doing this work with all of you, and appreciate your interrupting white dominant ways of working, especially around trying to be perfect and rushing things through. It's never worked for communities of color to operate that way. And so I'm supportive of moving more slowly and more intentionally. And I hope I can help wordsmith that resolution. It needs a little bit of work.
So I also just want to thank the superintendent for his leadership in this area, and also my fellow board members for all the things that Chair Lowry talked about in terms of how we're pushing one another. And I'll be really brief, but something you said that just struck me about, resolutions are important, but they're completely insufficient. And let's just be honest that passing a resolution is actually one of those things that makes us feel good and accomplishes very little to nothing. And so I agree, take some time, get it right, but really it's our actions. It's how we move forward. It's what we actually do every day. It's walking that talk, which is going to be important in terms of changing the culture of the district. And by changing the culture of the district, we change the culture of the community and contribute significantly to that. So thanks to the superintendent and all the staff and my fellow board members for helping sort of push us all along on this journey.
So it's perfect that I'm going to follow Director Scott, because I sort of endorse his comment that sort of governing by resolution, it's easy to put something on the agenda, it gets voted, and then it goes into the next meeting's minutes. And I think when I look at what the State Board of Education did in setting a framework for all the school districts around the state to have a conversation about what it means to belong, what symbolisms mean to our students and staff, how we welcome and include students, and what happens when there are acts or symbols of exclusion. And so I think we've got a great framework to work in. And I think while we'll take the time to craft a policy, or if we're going to do a resolution, I think probably the most important thing we can do is over the next 3 to 6 weeks, when I think our country is going to go through a very challenging national conversation, no matter what happens, that lots of our students and our staff are going to need extra supports. And probably the most important thing we did is make the investments last spring in the budget to provide additional supports to our students. But I think while we're doing the longer term work, to remember that our students are looking to the district's leaders to provide support for them. But it probably, I say, is going to be a very challenging and in some cases traumatic environment for lots of our students and staff. And it's our responsibilities as leaders to continue to provide that support. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and ways in which we can provide tangible support and not just passing a resolution.
I totally agree with that, Director Brim Edwards, and it's exactly along the lines that I was thinking of. And I think it's important for us when we make these symbolic gestures, which I think are important in and of themselves, it's important to connect them to the commitments that we're making in a very pragmatic and tangible way. For example, was just working with a group of community leaders who founded this PDX Love Over Hate group, and connected them with our list of student supports on a school by school, and also with our triage team that now can respond to hate incidents, that were trained to respond to hate incidents in our school environments. And now, you know, they still need to be able to respond to, unfortunately, those kind of incidents in a virtual environment, because they're still happening and they're still affecting our school communities. So I hope that we're always doing what we can to make sure that those investments and those commitments are really reaching everybody who needs them, and that people know what's available.
All right, thank you all. I know that this is something we will continue to work on and live into as we move forward. We're now headed into our Division 22 report. And so Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this next item?
Yes, I would. The next item is our, and we do these now and then, is a Division 22 update. And I'm going to invite our Deputy Superintendent who bears the lead responsibility on this, Dr. Craig Cuellar, and I think joined by our CAO, Dr. Luis Valentino, who are going to provide our annual report to you.
Yeah, good evening, Chair Lowry, Vice Chair Bailey, members of the board, and thank you, Superintendent Guerrero. Yes, I'm also joined by Dr. Valentino, our CAO, as well as Linda Smith, our Director of TAG and IB, as well as Aurora Terry, our Senior Director of College of Career Readiness, and also Daniel Kogan, one of our project administrators, is also joining us as well. This is the yearly requirement for all districts in Oregon to share with the community and the school board the compliance with our Oregon administrative rules, in which we are held accountable and responsible to as a school district. So today's presentation, we'll make sure we're going to go through the detailed community report. And I'm not seeing the presentation yet. Is it showing?
Sorry, I was trying to open it actually in something else.
Not yet. We still have our Brady Bunch view. There we go.
We can go to the next slide, Roseanne. So as a quick overview, the Division 22 Administrative Rules Assurances is a joint commitment between all school districts in Oregon and the ODE in providing a high quality educational experience and equitable opportunities for all students in our care. As part of our shared responsibility to provide quality service for our students and communities, this system promotes reciprocal accountability between school districts and the Oregon Department of Ed. The assurances articulate the floor of the education to be provided to students, not the ceiling. So compliance with Division 22 Oregon administrative rules ensures a basic level of service across the state. So the Division 22 assurances process will offer an opportunity for districts not in compliance to reflect on areas in need of intention and alignment, plan to how to address them, and to make sure that we are also receiving the technical assistance needed to move into compliance. Next slide, please. This is a review of last year's Division 22 community report that I presented to the school board on January 7th. The district certified compliance with all 54 OARs except for 4. And here is a status update on those specific OARs that are listed here on the slide. For media programs, the ODE determined that PPS was actually in compliance. The corrective action plan provided to the ODE indicated that PPS demonstrated compliance because we met the requirements by having certified teacher librarians in every school and by having articulated program goals and program services. Additionally, we exceeded the expectations for the OAR as we are in the process of aligning our program goals to the Oregon School Library Standards and associated K-14 learning goals with Common Core state standards and within our GVC framework. For teacher training related to dyslexia, the district is also now in compliance, having completed the corrective action plan. I'm excited later tonight in the board work session, we're going to be able to learn more about the great work that's taking place in dyslexia. So I'm really excited about that later to come. For program and services for TAG, the corrective action plan was approved. The district applied for an extension to this OAR in August, and we're going to share more in more detail around that OAR later in this presentation. And for instructional materials adoption, the corrective action plan was also approved. Because the district was not able to be in compliance with all instructional materials adoption by the beginning of the 2021 school year, the board did pass resolution 6164, approving the postponement of the OAR. This OAR is waived, however, for the 2019-2020 Division 22 assurances. Next slide, please. Before we do move forward in the presentation, I think it's important that we do take a step back and celebrate just the progress we've made as a school system. And here we're highlighting in the past 3 years, the specific OARs that we have moved into compliance in, which I think is really important. Sometimes it's very, very easy for us to focus on the opportunity gaps, but I think it's also important for us to also celebrate the progress that we have made as a school system in moving into compliance. Such as the complaint procedures, such as prevention, education, and drugs and alcohol, the human sexuality education, media programs, and teacher training related to dyslexia. So the team has done incredible work in the last 3 years to continue to move us forward, hopefully towards full compliance in the future. On April 16th, next slide. On April 16, 2020, the state board adopted a new administrative rule. And this rule establishes the Division 22 assurances in effect for the 2019 and 20 school year, accommodating for the school closures and providing appropriate flexibility to districts during this unprecedented time. School districts will be required to report on the Division 22 standards included in this new rule. Any standard not included in this new rule is waived for the 2019-20 school year. And tonight we'll be reporting on these 17 standards for the 2019 and 20 school year. Next slide, please. And listed here on this slide are the 17 OARs we were responsible for reporting on in this community report. The ODE reduced the number of standards from 54 to 17. And note that we are not, I just want the board to also note that we are not reporting on the instructional materials adoption for 2019 and 20, for instance. Again, we are moving from reporting on 54 OARs down to 17, where there was a significant reduction of the expected compliance that we were needed to be in compliance for. So this just points out to the 17 standards that we are being held accountable for by the ODE. Next slide, please. The state made another change to the Division 22 process by moving the reporting date to the fall. And this is why we are reporting in late October, opposed to the previous timeline that we were held to. The previous timeline had us reporting in January. This new change now gives us the most of the current school year to put in place action plans to correct areas we're out of compliance in, which is great because now we'll have the majority of the school year to put our action plans in place and hopefully move towards compliance to the following school year. Next slide, please. So this means for the 2019 and 20 assurance process, the district will report to their local school board and post the report to our webpage no later than November 1, 2020. Districts will then report assurances to the ODE no later than November the 15th of 2020. Shifting the Division 22 assurances timeline to the fall will allow the ODE to review district submissions and provide districts with actionable feedback on the corrective action plans earlier in the year, giving districts additional time to implement their corrective plans in order to achieve compliance by the start of the next school year. The November 15th submission deadline will permanently replace the February 15th submission deadline going forward. This is really, really good news because this can help stretch our timeline for moving into compliance. Next slide, please. And this is just a side-by-side summary chart that looks at the side-by-side comparison of requirements. As we can see previously, the requirements, we were held to 54 standards. This And for this current school year, we're being held to 17 standards. And really that flexibility was designed to accommodate the school year, which was disrupted by the pandemic. This also talks about the February 15th deadline no longer being the hard timeline for us. Moving forward, it'll be November 15th. Next slide, please. So we are in compliance with all 17 of the standards for 2019 and 20, except programs and services for TAG students. Portland Public School District was not able to complete the corrective action by the start of the 2021 year due to the state mandated early closure of school districts due to the pandemic and the introduction of distance learning to staff and students. Access to school and district buildings was not allowed, hindering sufficient access to teachers and students during the limited online learning. This is also cited in the memo that the board received in advance. So with that being said, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to our Director of TAG and IB, Linda Smith, who will go into a little more detail specific to this OAR. Linda?
Well, we're switching to Linda. Can I just ask a quick question? That's okay. The corrective action plan, is that a factor that came about because of previous years of not being in compliance? Or is it a corrective action plan because we had a complaint?
Last year in the 2019, hi everyone, Aurora Himal, Senior Director of College and Career Readiness. In the 2019-2020 school year, we did state that we were out of compliance for providing services for TAG students. So we were working on a corrective action plan that included training for teachers to correct for that.
So is the investigation separate? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand.
Yes, correct. So our corrective action was because we were non-compliant for Division 22. Then separately, there is a formal complaint that was made to the state that we're out of compliance for all three of the OAR. So the current investigation is in regards to the parent complaint, the formal, and not because we were out of compliance last year.
Thank you.
All right, Linda, I can see that you're talking to us, but I can't hear you. So I don't know if you're unmuted. Oh, there we go.
I got it. Sorry about that. You're on a little screen. So yes, there are two separate things. Sorry, Director Brim Edwards. I didn't realize that. So yes, there are two separate things. The parent appeal was done in the late spring or in February, and then the other corrective action was for the previous non-compliance of selecting non-compliance. So beginning this year in September 2020, PPS teachers will receive the rate and level training from their building TAG facilitators, and TAG facilitators also receive monthly professional development from our department, from the TAG department, on best practices for TAG students, focusing on strategies for differentiating, assess rate and level of learning, as well as key characteristics of a TAG student. The professional development is shared at the building sites by the facilitators, as well as through asynchronous learning activities in Canvas. New teacher training will also include identifying TAG students and the characteristics of a TAG student and how to assess the rate and level of already identified TAG students while providing best practice strategies for students to meet a TAG student's rate and level of learning. New professional development for new teacher professional development will be provided during the professional development time. That'll take place during the first few days. It's already taken place of the teacher in service through Canvas, through the asynchronous models that we've provided. And the TAG department is also collaborating with STEAM and humanities to embed best practices for TAG students in professional development, as well in the lesson planning. Asynchronous and synchronous professional development will also be available for teachers monthly on Canvas beginning in October 2020. Guess it's the next slide. Craig.
Yep. So good evening, Chair Laurie, directors, superintendent. So as we move into 2020, the understanding that on September 17th, the state board adopted a new administrative rule for the school year. And this rule establishes the Division 2022, the Division 22 standards in effect for this school year, which is a continued modification and accommodation due to the school closures, providing appropriate flexibility for school districts during this unprecedented time. And school districts will be required to report on the Division 22 standards included in this new rule. However, any standard not included in this new rule is waived for the 2020-2021 school year. As you will see on the right side of the slide, that includes personalized learning requirements for the diploma, vision and hearing screening, the PE minutes, and modifications to the instructional time rule. Next slide, please. And so as we move into the 2021 school year, we anticipate being in compliance once again with all the 3 OARs. The first is the instructional materials adoption. And as referenced in the staff report from August of this school year, PPS has been unable to purchase comprehensive curriculum resources in content areas described by Division 22. Over the course of the last few years, the school district has made concerted efforts to supplement existing core materials or has done partial adoptions with the limited funding being provided. However, through the proposed bond investment, we hope to adopt comprehensive, culturally relevant curricular resources and materials for K-12 classrooms across all disciplines. This investment will put our district in compliance with the state required adoption timeline and will provide updated resources and materials across core subject areas, including language arts, math, science, social sciences, the arts, and the social emotional learning program. The second OAR in which we will be out of compliance is the physical education requirement. The OAR is new as of the 2019-20 school year. These requirements were in place previously. However, they were not part of Division 22 until the 2019-2020 school year. The requirements were waived in 2019-2020 due to the interruption to the school year. The minute requirements have been waived for this year as well. However, the district will be out of compliance because students in the middle grades will not be participating in PE throughout the school year as required by the modified OAR of students having physical education throughout the school year. Middle grade students in PPS are enrolled in 1/4 of PE per grade level for the 2020-2021 school year. The third OAR, which we will be out of compliance, will be the tag related OARs. And as Linda Smith just shared, we are currently still under an audit under programs and services for tag students. And ODE has indicated that once the audit is concluded, that most likely the corrective action will include PPS needing to make corrective actions across the 3 tag related OARs. And so that completes the Division 22 presentation. I will turn it back to our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Cuellar.
Thank you, Dr. Valentino. And board, that does conclude our presentation. If there are any questions, the team and I are here to answer anything that you may have.
So I have a question. So I'm glad to see the progress that's been made on some longstanding issues that have been before PPS that we haven't met the sort of basic standards. I would like to ask a few questions about the tag non-compliance, because as long as I've been on the board or affiliated with PPS, I think we've been out of compliance. And so the question I have, and I will put a like COVID asterisk on it, so just recognizing that we're in unusual circumstances, but is there a path and plan that gets us into compliance? And recognizing that compliance is the lowest common denominator. I think lots of talented and gifted parents of talented and gifted students would say sort of like that's the lowest bar. But do we have a plan to meet that sort of basic compliance, and when will that happen?
May I respond to that? So one of the I've had the great fortune, honestly, since last spring in the brick and mortar visits, I was able to go through 500 classrooms in the spring along with ODE. And this fall, during virtual visits, I've been in about 120 classrooms in virtual classrooms. And so what we are seeing is the same thing that we saw in the brick and mortar visits as we're seeing now, and that is it's teacher training. It's not that teachers aren't doing the best that they know how. It's just that in the university programs, there's no teacher prep for gifted and talented education. And so now the burden is on PPS to ensure that every classroom teacher knows how to assess for rate and level of learning. And that is a skill that needs to be taught. So our plan is really to get to as many of those teachers as we possibly can, not relying only on our TAG facilitators to do that work. And so with Canvas, the accessibility to all of our administrators and to our classroom teachers having access to modules that we are preparing, we're hopeful that at least through the distance learning piece and the virtual schoolhouse that we're in right now, that teachers will have access to that training because we don't have access to them. It's going to take a long time. There's a lot of teachers in PPS, and we're going through every one of these classrooms. And what I am seeing is if we go in one building and there's one teacher, ODE is saying that's not doing assess rate and level of learning, then we're out of compliance. So if one teacher is not meeting the assess rate and level of a student, we're going to be out of compliance. So that's a heavy lift. What I can say that's been very positive, an example of some great work that's happening that we've seen during virtual learning was at Ockley Green. We went into 8 of their classrooms virtually. And what was nice to see is the expectation was the same throughout all of the classrooms in which the learning targets were there. Extensions were added to every single one of the agendas and the learning outcomes in every one of the classrooms. We also saw some of the highest student participation, both showing their cameras on and participating, and teachers allowing students to answer questions versus the teacher answering the question for the student and not waiting for that to happen. So there are some real positives. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a long while. We have a lot of teachers that we need to train and ensure that assess rate and level is happening, but they need to know what to look for in order to assess rate and level of learning. So it's a heavy lift, I'll be honest with you. So, and then if we, based on the preliminary outcomes of the investigation, we'll have a lot of heavy lifting to do, not only with rate and level of learning, but other things that will go along with that. So.
Thank you. I have a follow-up, but go ahead, somebody else, if anybody else has a question. Or if not, I'll just jump in. I don't know if anybody's trying to turn their microphone on. You can interrupt me if you are. So I guess my second question, so it sounds like we have a plan, but it may take a while. I'm assuming there's other districts in Oregon, larger districts that are in compliance. Have we looked at what their best practice are? Because I say, for as long as I know, PPS has been out of compliance on the Division 22 tag requirements. I'm wondering if there are neighboring districts that we can sort of leverage their sort of best practices or learnings that they've had in order to be in compliance at that lowest bar.
And that's one of the great things with the investigation that's happening, because I'm sitting side by side with the tag expert at ODE, and so she's able to share things that are happening in other districts. They do look very different than ours. So we're trying to take the best practices from there that she's sharing with us to bring into our Canvas models that we're putting together for teachers who have boots on the ground in the work presently, so that we can make that that shift. In the past, it was heavily relied on the TAC facilitator at the building level to do the professional development, like a train the trainer model. And we see that that's very difficult because there's so many things within the district that have to happen, and mandates that come from the state and other compliance issues that get eaten up during professional development and faculty meetings and such. So we felt that it was very important that we could reach directly the teachers, the ones that are actually face-to-face with the students, and really allowing them to build capacity in what formative assessment looks like and how you use that data quickly to adjust for rate and level. So that takes time. We're doing it. We've already have our first module out, and teachers and administrators have received a notification that it's there. We've had many teachers already sign up. So I feel like this is a great first stab that we've not ever had before. And so I feel very, very hopeful that this is going to at least get that first breath kind of thing happening as quickly as we can get going through virtual learning, until we can have that face-to-face and get into the schools and really work with teams of teachers. So.
Thank you. And I really appreciate how many classrooms you've been on, because I'm sure that's really informing the work. Thanks.
It has been an amazing adventure. I will just say that. I've loved every minute of it. And actually the first day that we did it, and we were in a kindergarten class, if I can take the liberty of that, and just to see all the little round cheeks of the kindergartners their first day, it just kind of melted Angela Allen and I's hearts, right? Like we were like, oh, look at these kids. We get to be in a classroom. It's so exciting. So anyway, yes.
Well, thank you all so much
it's
for
crazy to think that that's the only classroom they know.
Thank you all so much for your work on this and for this report about our status with the Division 22. Superintendent Guerrero, I know we have another exciting item on our agenda tonight. Would you like to introduce this next item?
Chair Lowry, can I interject for 1 second before we move on, just to
Sure, I thought you were finished, Chair Constant, or
no,
Director.
I just want to thank Aurora Heimel, welcome you back from your maternity leave, and thank you for giving us a sneak peek at your beautiful son.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks. It's wonderful to be back. Thank you.
Welcome back, Aurora. Well, yes, Chair Lowry, we have yet more excitement still in our meeting left. So as I think directors all know, the Teachers Standards and Practice Commission, more commonly known as TSPC, is Oregon's licensing agency for all educators. Their mission's to establish and uphold professional standards of excellence and communicate those standards to the public and educators for the benefit of Oregon students. So the agency is led by Executive Director Dr. Anthony Roselles, who I think is also coming up on his 3rd year anniversary. And Tony's been a key partner and collaborator, of course, not just on personnel matters, but in particular with growing work in the area of career pathways and pipelines. So we certainly appreciate his ongoing partnership. But Dr. Roselles is with us this evening to share some exciting news about the appointment of one of our own educators to the commission. So Dr. Roselles.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lowry, Superintendent Guerrero, and members of the board. My name is Anthony Roselles. I am the Executive Director of the Teacher Standards and Practices Commission, as Superintendent Guerrero mentioned. And I wanted to first start by sharing just a few minutes about what TSBC is. TSBC is rather unique across the country because most states, their licensing boards for educators is actually a part of the Department of Education. Oregon is one of about a dozen states where the licensing board is independent of the Department of Education. In my position, I report to a separate 17-member commission that is appointed by Governor, in this case, Governor Brown. The commission is made up of members that are primarily educators. 8 of the 17 members are teachers. There are elementary and a secondary principal. There's a school board member. There are members of teacher education programs and a few public members, including one school board representative. So the commission is dedicated, as Superintendent Guerrero mentioned, not only to the licensing of our educators, but really to improving the performance of educators and, of course, therefore, our students. We approve teacher preparation programs offered by all of the Oregon colleges and universities. We, as I mentioned, we license teachers, administrators, and other personnel employed in Oregon schools. And when necessary, we also take disciplinary actions when educators commit crimes or violate standards of competent and ethical performance. One of the challenges for TSBC has been in several years is that it has not been able to participate as much in the ongoing professional development of our current educators. We set requirements for continuing professional education, but the commission has not really held its, what I would say is its proper place in working with superintendents and school districts in trying to really move forward the idea of what an educator will need to master and be able to do in support of our students in the coming years. If anything, this year with COVID and also our wildfires has demonstrated that if we are not very mindful about the preparation and qualifications of our educators in areas such as distance learning, we can get caught off guard, and who suffers the most? Our students. So the work of providing and assuring that every Oregon classroom has a quality, well-trained educator is the purpose of TSBC. And this work could not happen but for the volunteers who serve as commissioners on TSBC. We are pleased to announce at TSBC this evening that Governor Brown has appointed, and the Senate has confirmed, Dr. Michelle York as a member of the TSBC Commission. Dr. York is a teacher at West Sylvan Middle School. She teaches math and sometimes science, and she is also the avid lead at West Sylvan. Michelle is also one of the reasons why she was recommended for this appointment is Michelle has been dedicated to teacher prep for several years now. She has participated in several what we call program reviews at TSBC. These are when we actually have colleagues within the education environment. They actually review a particular university's program for teacher preparation, and they provide me a recommendation about whether that program is meeting state standards or if there are areas that are needed for improvement. Dr. York has proudly and graciously served on in doing this work for the commission. And I think this is a testament not only to Michelle's dedication, but the dedication of the school board, Portland Public Schools, and its superintendent and administrators to furthering education professionalism in Oregon for the benefit of our students. So without no further ado, I would like to introduce and welcome Dr. York to the commission. And I do believe Dr. York was invited, and I think I saw her on there. All right.
Lowry, with your
kind words.
Can we invite Dr. York to, if she'd like to share any remarks?
Yes, please. You don't have to, but we'd love to hear from you if you're up for it.
Yeah, this is a little short notice, and I apologize. I have nothing prepared, but I am very excited to take on this new role. with the TSPC. I have been very dedicated to mentoring new teachers wherever I am and taking on student teachers. And I know that there's just so much we need to do to prepare teachers to be successful. And anything I can do to support that through my work with TSPC, I'm really excited to move forward with that.
Thank you. And I would like to mention for the Portland Public School Board that our relationship at TSPC with PPS and its administrative team has grown immensely in the last few years. At least from the stories I've heard about how that relationship has been in the past. Many of you who've been involved with schools in the past have known that TSPC was often known as the stepchild in the education agencies that was woefully behind in license application processing. I am pleased to say in the last few years, we've really ramped up our work, and now most licenses are being processed within a month. And many of them, aside from our busiest times of the year, are even processed more quickly. That's a big improvement from the 3 or 4 months that many of you may recall is as recently as 3-4 years ago. And we are really making some strong efforts this year, particularly to reduce the barriers for educators of color to enter into the field. Some of this work has been done with some of the staff at PPS, not only as commissioners, but Superintendent Guerrero, Deputy Superintendent Cuellar, in working not only to develop teachers, but more importantly, because I think this is important for teachers to succeed, is to have quality administrators and principals in their buildings. This is a key emphasis of TSPC, and I can share with you that I really feel that this is an emphasis that PPS shares as well. So I look forward to continuing to work with Superintendent Guerrero, and also coming back and spending some time talking with you as a school board down the road here about some of the other good projects that we're working on that will definitely impact PPS students. Superintendent Guerrero, Chair Lowry, thank you for allowing me the time to present with you this evening.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Ruselius. I know that Chief of HR Sharon Reese, Deputy Cuellar, and other members of the team enjoy our regular opportunities to collaborate on some of our shared goals. Thank you for being with us this evening. And, for the guest of honor, congratulations, Dr. York. Thank you for representing.
All right, do we think we can do the wave for Dr. York like this? It would be challenging because all of our Zoom things are in a different order, but just imagine it, Dr. York. And thank you, Dr. Ruselius, for being with us here tonight and for the work you do to support our students by supporting educators. All right, we are at committee reports. So I have a list of a few of you who I know have had meetings over since our last board meeting. So Julia, I think there was an audit committee meeting since the last board meeting. Would you like to report on that? Julia, I can't hear you. The suspense. It's exciting. It's showing you as still muted. So let's go ahead and move on to direct. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So the audit committee did have a meeting on October 14th. We have a new board member. We traded Scott for Scott. And we've, in addition to one community member, we also have 2 student reps who have been participating in the meetings. We had 2 main topics of the audit committee. One was a discussion about the implementation plan for the contracts audit. So stay tuned. We'll bring that back, probably send it around to the board and also post it. We had a number of comments both at the meeting, but also follow-up comments from committee members that we need to integrate into the feedback on the contracts audit. And then second, we recommended to the board 2 audits to add to the 2020-2021 audit plan, and in the consent agenda this evening, we approved that. And the two audits will be, there's two audits currently that the board previously approved that are ongoing. That's the procurement card audit and also the ACH or the wiring, financial wiring audit that are underway. When those are finished up, there'll be two more audits in the pipeline. And one will be sort of a sampling of schools' associated student body funds. And then the second will be a health and safety audit about whether building safety plans are being followed. And of course, that will be, those audits will only happen once we return to either a hybrid or some sort of in-person learning. So the recommendation was made, and thank you to the board tonight for approving those contract audit plans so that we can have some ready to go when the current audits are completed. We also, there was the third audit that was recommended by the Office of the Internal Performance Audit, and that was an audit relating to the facility usage and whether the current fee waivers that we have for title schools was actually being utilized equitably. And the decision was made to not advance that to the board tonight for to be approved, but to wait to the next meeting so that we can consider that and two other ideas that were advanced. One was a hardship transfer audit and also an audit of ESL. So the December meeting, we'll hear more from the Office of Internal Performance Audit about their thinking, their thoughts about the risk and the scope of those three concepts. And the last item we had at the committee meeting is that we have currently an opening on the committee and for one of the community members, and on the PPS audit committee page is a short description of what we're looking for and a link to so people can apply. I'll send that around to the board and also post it in a number of different places and share it with some of the regional public auditing offices. So if anybody has somebody they want to recommend to serve on the audit committee or are interested in serving, please let us know. I think the cutoff date is the Friday of that first week of November. So that's the audit committee report. I'm sorry, applications are due November 6th.
Awesome. Director Bailey or Director Moore, did you have any updates about the Southeast Guiding Coalition or the enrollment and balancing or DBRAC or SACIT or whatever all we're calling everything these days? I know those are all very different, but I know that both of you are involved for a long time in these conversations around the district.
You know, that's a little bit of a trigger for some of us. Yeah, the group of community members and principals and PPS staff, they've been meeting for, I think they're in their second month of meetings and are meeting again on Thursday. You can watch those meetings on YouTube. And Director Moore and I are going to actually do a short presentation to the group on Thursday. We've been kind of had a hands-off watching, but I think there's the need for clarifying what the board is looking for in terms of this process, and then just being able to answer any questions that might come up as well. If you've been through this or watched PPS struggle with this over the last 10 years, you know this is an incredibly challenging process and very complex. So hopefully we can help it along in the right direction. The other thing coming up is they were going to have an open house. I think that's been pushed back to later in October than they were initially anticipating that. So the committee is still working through a number of scenarios that staff and our consultant have brought forward around configurations, around the location of DLI programs, and so on. And again, this is a really challenging process, and I just want to thank everybody on that committee for engaging in that.
I just want to clarify the open house is going to be on the Thursday in the first week of November.
Okay, yeah, move to the first week of November. Thanks. October is running out. Thanks, bye.
All right, thank you, Director Bailey. Are there any other committee or conference reports? Director Constam, did you want to give any comments about the Council of Great City Schools conference this past week?
Just very briefly, that I hope people had a chance to tune in. There were so many different breakout sessions that I couldn't necessarily tell who among us was jumping into different sessions, but there was just so much to learn. The majority of the presentations touched on COVID in some way, or on how districts are responding in accelerating their equity work and empowering student voice around Black Lives Matter movement. But just lots of very inspiring and interesting presentations. We had an opportunity to be in a conversation with Oakland and Minneapolis around school policing and school security, and what does that look like as we break down old systems, and all three of us are still in various stages of recreating the new and what that looks like. I had a chance to hear Dr. Brown's presentation. I don't know if anyone else did, on just some of our challenges with assessment, and again, focusing on where we are with the pandemic. So thank you to all the staff who prepared presentations and who took the time for themselves to learn from their colleagues around the country. And thank you, Superintendent Guerrero, for your leadership too in helping to do a lot of the planning for this conference. I think from a mechanical and technical standpoint, they pulled it off really well, going virtual on very short notice, and attendance was still good. So there's really an appetite for us all to learn from one another, even in these strange times. Superintendent, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there.
I would say our students were also featured. We had our grant dancers, wasn't it? And then Superintendent Guerrero, if you want to talk about our other student that was part of the panel.
The student panel was inspiring and phenomenal. And I think everybody got a link to that, but definitely take the time to watch it. You'll be so glad you did.
I was going to share the same thing. If you haven't had a chance, please watch that short segment. It'll be well worth the time to hear our youth talk about, the really complex issues in our world right now, and just the level of depth and sophistication. I learned a lot, and I think helped to hopefully inspire some dialogues. But the youth are leading. That's definitely what stood out. So part of the member district's proceedings as members of the council includes quarterly board of directors meetings. So thank you, Director Constant, for participating this past Saturday, half the day, to work through all the business of the council and supporting member districts. I think the next opportunity to get engaged is the legislative advocacy that tends to happen in March. We won't know if that'll be in person still, but certainly the council has always been a strong voice on K-12 and public ed, and nothing's changing in that regard, especially as Congress is deliberating, hopefully, on what a stimulus might look like to support schools across the country.
And we all have whiplash paying attention to that process, because it literally changes week by week.
All right, any other reports from board members? Great. All right, we are, is there any other agenda items, any other business before we adjourn and move into our study session? All right, the next meeting of the board will be held November 10th at 6 p.m. And this is different than our usual pattern of every other week. And this is so that we can watch with our communities as the election results roll in on the 3rd. And I am especially looking forward to celebrating the bond passing. So please make that a reality and vote yes on measure 2215. This meeting is now adjourned, and we are going to gather back in our study session at 7:55. That gives you 8 minutes to take a stretch break and do what you need to do. And we'll gather back again at 7:55.